just introduce my guest, who is Brian Stevens, and he's the CEO and the founder of an industrial design firm based in Dublin, but which has offices in Eindhoven and, as I have in my notes, San Francisco, but I think I meant San Francisco. And we're going to talk a bit about the role of design now. So there are all of these different types of designers now, different design disciplines. So the things like job titles like UX versus product design or whatever, but in a world where everybody is expected to be creative, from the CEO to the finance guy, what does it mean nowadays to really be a creative?
So I might just start with that sort of tantalizing thing about the difference between UX and the creative disciplines and where the two fits, where design and UX fits together. I think user experience has been a really important development in the creative industry, in that now for the first time people realize, yeah, we do have to look at the whole experience. We have to start at the very beginning and we have to finish at the very end, and we have to think about the business proposition and think about all the bits in the middle and think about everything that affects the consumer or the user. One of the important things that we then have to do is do something with all that data, and we have to do it well, and we have to do it in a beautiful, coordinated, complete and comprehensive way. And I think that that's where the creative disciplines come in, and that's where the two things meet perfectly together. So it's a simple thing, better understanding and deep understanding and making the right connections, and then connecting these things well with the creative step. And I think the big change for designers is also to understand that that creative step is now collaboration. It's collaboration with the founders of the client company, it's collaboration with the user, it's collaboration with data that might be out there. It's this ability to find a solution through better understanding. But the creative part's really important and needs to be nurtured and facilitated and resourced well.
So if we go back to first principles on what really are those creative skills, like what sets a designer apart from anybody else within a company, and what are the most important types of training they've had, which the rest of the company can use?
Yeah. So I don't think that actually they are that different, because I think this generation of people are naturally creative. It's part of our culture now, so creativity comes from everywhere. Designers are no longer unique. They're no longer on a pedestal. They're collaborators. But they have a responsibility, I think.
Well, that's partly why I'm asking the question. So what's now special about designers when everybody is a creative?
So I think there's a few things that are key. I think to watch for beauty is one, probably one of the highest ones I'd put. So really good designers, and you can see it when they're really good, have this ability to take complex data, takes complex information, take complex problems, and create something that's cohesive and holistic and complete in every way. And that's the mark of, that's what people love about design. And also to do it in a way that, not doesn't just touch the technical things, but also touches your heart, and it really connects with what's important. It's that ubiquity that people are looking for. So being able to do that is some of that is innate. Some of it can be trained, but some of it is an innate skill, and some people are brilliant at it.
So how are you trained to recognize beauty, and how has the definition of beauty actually expanded now that design is not just about making something look pretty, but it could be anything from how the buying experience for a product?
It can be beauty, and it can be a beautiful business model. It can be a beautiful relationship between how the product gets used in its latter stages of its development, or how it's used. So it can affect all parts of it. The other thing actually that's important, it isn't just if it was only just making things beautiful, it'd be fine. But I think there's also an ability to be propositional. I think that's a really important characteristic. So
what do you mean by propositional?
Well, I think sometimes when you get a lot of problems in a problem or in a project, you then have to come up with a proposal. And I think that ability to propose quickly and effectively and in a persuasive way is a very important characteristic of a good creative. So I think they're the two. If you had to pick out two things, I think they'd be two that I'd pick out, besides that ability to collaborate and to empathize, to observe and to bring some rigor to the process. I think the other thing is just to work hard. I think that's always a characteristic of design. It's late nights, it's getting it right and having the commitment to do it right. So that's also a very important characteristic.
I I think another thing you mentioned was being able to go from the whole to the part and back again, and you said that's one of the most rare skills, actually.
Yeah, and I think as projects become more complex and more multidisciplined and more multi-layered, I think the ability to stand back and go for simplicity can be really important. So usually the solution is probably going to be simple, and to be able to hold the 5 key characteristics or criteria for success is really a challenge there.
Okay. So some of these things you need to be able to recognize and create beauty and harmony in some way. You need to be able to go from the whole to the part, and you need to be propositional. So, like, can you give us a couple of examples of your own projects where you have tried to apply some of these skills and the results that came out of them?
Yeah, so I brought a few samples because it's always good to have something tangible in a meeting like this. So this is a product called artefacts. So it's a thermometer which avoids contact, so you can check somebody's thermometer by quickly, not touching the person. So, this didn't start like this. When we saw this the first time, it was a rather large box with lots of bits of electronics on it, and a lot of buttons, and a lot of bits and pieces, and a clear business proposition, but not a clear solution to what the problem might be. So I think the role of the designer in a relatively simple product like this is to just keep it simple. To see the long game, because this is a simple consumer product, but there's obviously a kind of the next step is a more clinical version of this product.
And did it start off as being contactless, but just a much bulkier, more ugly, whatever complicated thing?
Yeah, and I think through understanding the user and how it was going to be used, it helped us to understand, the key thing is to take somebody's temperature, and that's it. Being able to read it, and the experience being clean and effective. And one of the things was, we found we could put it on the fridge, and that made a big difference to people, so people could find the thermometer at home.
All right.
Simple things like that. And it's led to the clinical version will be a little bit more relevant to the clinical space, and it'll have a little bit more complexity. But essentially, the simple characteristic of that product will apply. It's a simple example, but I think it illustrates well the importance of that sort of sense of cohesion in a project. And it can apply just as much to the user interface as to any other part of the product or the packaging or the distribution model or whatever.
And is it easier to make something that's more simple, more harmonious and beautiful than it is something really complicated?
No.
Okay.
The opposite is true. I think that what that requires is rigor, patience, commitment, discipline, stubbornness, persuasiveness. They're the kind of characteristics. So sometimes, often that's the designer's role is to go for the essence of what's important, and then to make something, what the consumer often wants something simple, and avoiding making it complicated is usually one of the first steps in developing the relationship with the client.
All right, and I think you have another example for us as well.
Yeah, this is Silver. This is a smart home control device. So it's actually the project is actually to romanticize the technology a little bit. So the client's business is in building the grid or building the network that allows us to have a controller for the home, that's a smart controller for the home, have the smart home work, and that's getting Bluetooth smart to work is a process in itself, and building the right infrastructure to do it. So it's really the kind of the tangible end of an infrastructure project. So here it was just about understanding. It started off more complicated, so it was about understanding that the user wants something simple. In this instance, it's a light controller, a light dimmer. So the consumer wants something simple. You can dim lighting, you can switch it on and off, or you can change color. Okay. So it's taking a new paradigm for a user interface and doing it really well.
Well, the word romanticize is an interesting one there, because that is not something you hear said a lot about Internet of Things. So was that something that came from your side, or that came from the customer's side? Was that something the designer said, okay, we need to add here, or?
Well, I think that project was about designing something completely different, and
okay.
I think we realized, I probably romanticize might be pushing it a bit. I think maybe dramatize, or make relevant, or make clear.
Dramatize is also an interesting one, so you can go with either of those.
So, well, I think sometimes there's a problem that people are overloaded with technology, and there's a need to make it clear. There's a need to make people excited about it. There's a need to get people to have an emotional involvement in it, or just to make it tangible in some way. And I think that's a huge part of the role of designer in all sorts of ways, or the creative people in all sorts of ways, is to do that. So making things tangible is a very important part of it, especially in technical projects.
So going from the really functional to something that people have an emotional connection with, or...
Yeah, precisely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another thing we talked a bit about before was how to work with clients. So especially clients who are not necessarily design driven. Like I myself, for example, I have a background as a software developer, so I don't have any like design background. So how do you educate clients on how to work effectively with designers, or with you as a design consultancy?
Yeah, and I think that what we talked about earlier was that probably the most important thing of all, I think, for people who are going to engage with people in the creative process is that the client or the sponsor of a design program is actually the most powerful person in the room. They got the money, they have the resources, they have the vision, they have the dream. So how they do that and how they engage with creatives is largely up to them. And actually also the solution is usually a collaboration between the creatives and the sponsor. I won't say client because sometimes it's an in-house relationship. So the sponsor of the project, the leader of the project, it is their dream, and the role of a really good creative team is to realize that dream.
And I think clients don't often realize that.
So they're in the powerful position, and their mistakes get realized in the product one way or another. You know, so if they have a fantastic vision and they can do something really amazing and ambitious, great. If their dream is flawed or imperfect, guess what? It's partly their responsibility. It's not just up to the creative people. I think there's a couple of other things that are very important. Usually it's not a problem in a startup, but in a big company or even a medium-sized company, as understanding and deciding what the criteria for success is really important. And then I think probably even more important than that is just defining who the team are, who is in the team, keep it tight, keep it small. Don't let data or the back end of the office make the thing more complex than it should be. If there's a good team there, multidisciplinary team there to understand how to run a project, that always makes them go better. Obviously, you know,
okay.
Designers want to be empowered. They want to be liberated to do great work. So empowerment and resources and things like that are also important.
So if you're a client who wants to work with a design firm, you basically have to recognize that you are at least 50% of the success. So I think that's a good point in which to finish. So thank you very much, Brian.
Good. Thank you. Thanks very much.